The morning sun blazed over downtown Atlanta as Captain Maya Richardson stepped out of her silver sedan, dressed in casual jeans and a simple white blouse. After working undercover for 3 grueling weeks investigating corruption within the police department, she finally had a day off. Her muscles ached from the tension of maintaining her false identity, and all she wanted was a quiet coffee and a moment to breathe. The cafe on Peachtree Street was her favorite spot, a small sanctuary where she could disappear into anonymity and remember what it felt like to be just Maya, not Captain Richardson. As she walked toward the entrance, she noticed a commotion near the corner. A young officer, badge gleaming in the sunlight, stood over a homeless man who was gathering his belongings from the sidewalk. The officer's face was twisted with disgust, his posture aggressive and domineering. Maya's instincts kicked in immediately. She had seen this behavior before, the abuse of power that corroded the force from within. Her hand instinctively moved toward her hip where her service weapon usually rested, but she caught herself. She was off duty, dressed as a civilian, and technically still undercover. The homeless man, weathered and frail, mumbled apologies as he tried to move his cardboard sign and tattered sleeping bag. Officer Derek Morrison, according to his name tag, kicked the man's belongings into the street with deliberate cruelty. A small crowd had begun to gather, phones raised, recording the interaction. Maya felt her jaw tighten. She had spent 15 years on the force, working her way up from beat cop to captain, and she had zero tolerance for officers who betrayed their oath. "Excuse me, officer," Maya called out, her voice calm but firm. "That's unnecessary force against someone who isn't resisting." Morrison spun around, his eyes narrowing as they landed on Maya. He was young, maybe 26, with the kind of arrogance that came from a few years on the job and no real consequences for bad behavior. He looked her up and down, taking in her casual clothes and natural hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. His lip curled into a sneer that made Maya's blood run cold. "This doesn't concern you, lady," Morrison said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Move along before you become part of the problem." Maya took a step closer, her posture relaxed but her eyes hard as steel. "I'm making it my concern. You're a public servant, and that man has rights. You can't just kick his belongings around like garbage." The crowd grew larger, sensing drama. Morrison's partner, a stocky officer named Chen according to his badge, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Morrison, however, seemed to feed off the attention. He strutted toward Maya, invading her personal space in a clear attempt at intimidation. "You know what your problem is," Morrison said, his voice rising. "People like you always think you know better. Always trying to tell us how to do our jobs. You have no idea what we deal with every single day." Maya remained perfectly still, her training taking over. She had dealt with bullies her entire career, and Morrison was textbook. He was performing for the crowd, establishing dominance, trying to make her back down. But Maya Richardson had never backed down from a challenge in her life, and she wasn't about to start now. "I'm asking you politely to treat that man with basic human dignity," Maya said, her voice steady. "That's all." Morrison's face flushed red. He glanced at his partner, then back at the growing crowd of onlookers. In that moment, Maya saw his calculation. He was going to escalate. She had seen it 1,000 times before, the moment when an officer decided that being right mattered less than being respected, or feared. What happened next occurred in slow motion. Morrison leaned forward, his face twisted with rage and contempt, and spit directly at Maya's feet. The glob of saliva landed on her sneaker, and the crowd gasped collectively. But Morrison wasn't done. He looked directly into Maya's eyes and spit again, this time the spittle landing on her jeans. The world seemed to stop. Maya stood frozen, not from fear or shock, but from the sheer audacity of what had just occurred. She had been threatened before, had guns pointed at her, had faced down gang members and corrupt officials. But this public disrespect, this degradation in front of dozens of witnesses, cut deeper than any of that. It wasn't just about her. It was about every black woman who had ever been treated as less than human, every person of color who had suffered abuse from those sworn to protect them. Maya's mind raced through her options in the seconds following Morrison's vile act. She could feel the weight of every eye in the crowd upon her, could sense the collective holding of breath as people waited to see how she would respond. Some were still recording on their phones, capturing this moment that would likely go viral within hours. Maya knew that whatever she did next would define not just this encounter, but potentially impact the entire investigation she had been working on for weeks. Morrison stood before her with his chest puffed out, a smug smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He clearly expected her to either retreat in humiliation or escalate into a physical confrontation that would give him justification to arrest her. It was a calculated move, one that revealed just how comfortable he was with abusing his authority. Maya wondered how many other people he had humiliated, how many other incidents had gone unrecorded, unreported, buried under the weight of his badge. "You done here?" Morrison asked, his voice mocking. "Or do you need another lesson in staying out of police business?" Chen, his partner, finally spoke up, his voice uncertain. "Morrison, maybe we should just—" "Shut it, Chen," Morrison snapped without taking his eyes off Maya. "This woman needs to understand her place." Those words hung in the air like poison gas. Her place. Maya had heard variations of that phrase her entire life. As a child growing up in the projects of South Atlanta, teachers had suggested her place was vocational school, not college. As a rookie cop, fellow officers had implied her place was behind a desk, not on the streets. As one of the few black women to make captain before 40, she had been told repeatedly, in ways both subtle and overt, that her place was anywhere but in a position of authority. The homeless man, the catalyst for this entire confrontation, had quietly gathered his belongings and moved down the street, forgotten in the drama. Maya noticed a young black girl in the crowd, maybe 13 or 14, watching with wide eyes. The girl's mother had her arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Maya saw in that girl's face a mixture of fear and recognition, the understanding that this could happen to anyone who looked like them. That girl was why Maya had become a cop in the first place. Not for the power or the pension, but because she believed deeply that law enforcement could be a force for good, that it should protect the vulnerable rather than victimize them. She had spent her career trying to reform the system from within, mentoring young officers, implementing community policing programs, and yes, running undercover investigations into corruption. Maya reached slowly into her back pocket. Morrison's hand immediately moved to his service weapon, a reflex that revealed his guilty conscience. If he truly believed he had done nothing wrong, he wouldn't be so quick to assume a threat. The crowd murmured nervously, and Chen took a step forward, his hand also moving toward his gun. "Easy," Maya said calmly, her movements deliberate and visible. "I'm just getting my identification." "I don't care about your ID," Morrison said, but there was a slight waver in his voice now. Something in Maya's composure had shifted the dynamic. She wasn't acting like a victim or an aggressor. She was acting like someone who held all the cards and was simply waiting for the right moment to play them. Maya pulled out her wallet, a worn leather billfold she had carried for over a decade. Inside was her driver's license, her credit cards, a photo of her late mother, and something else. Something that would change everything. She opened it slowly, letting Morrison see the official police identification first, then the badge. Not a regular officer's badge, but the distinct captain's shield of the Atlanta Police Department. Morrison's face went through a series of transformations that would have been comical under different circumstances. Confusion, then recognition, then absolute horror. The color drained from his cheeks as the full weight of his actions crashed down upon him. He had just spit on his superior officer, had publicly humiliated a captain in front of dozens of witnesses while she was conducting an undercover investigation. "Captain Richardson," Maya said, her voice quiet but carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "Atlanta PD, Internal Affairs Division. Officer Morrison, I've been investigating complaints of excessive force and discriminatory behavior in this precinct for the past 3 weeks. Congratulations, you've just provided me with the most damning evidence I could have hoped for." Chen's face had gone pale as well. He had stood by and said nothing while his partner assaulted a superior officer. His career was likely over too, though Maya suspected he might be salvageable with proper retraining and accountability. Morrison, however, was finished. There was no coming back from this. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs and a few scattered cheers. Phones were still recording, capturing Morrison's face as he realized his entire future had just collapsed. Maya maintained her calm exterior, but inside, she felt a mixture of satisfaction and profound sadness. This was why she did this work, to root out the officers who damaged public trust and endangered communities. But it never felt like a victory, only like a necessary amputation of diseased tissue from a body she loved. Morrison's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. What could he possibly say? The evidence was overwhelming, recorded from multiple angles, witnessed by dozens. His actions spoke for themselves. The silence that followed Maya's revelation stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Officer Morrison's swagger had completely evaporated, replaced by a trembling uncertainty that made him look much younger than his years. His hand, which moments ago had rested confidently on his service weapon, now hung limply at his side. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning coolness, and Maya could see his mind racing, desperately searching for an exit from the trap he had built for himself. "Captain, I didn't know," Morrison stammered, his voice cracking. "If I had known who you were." "Stop," Maya interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. "Don't insult both of us by suggesting you would have behaved differently if you knew my rank. That's exactly the problem, Morrison. You should treat every citizen with respect, regardless of who they are or what they look like. The badge doesn't give you the right to degrade people. It gives you the responsibility to serve them." Chen, Morrison's partner, had taken several steps back, physically distancing himself from the unfolding disaster. Maya noticed his body language, the way he kept glancing between Morrison and the patrol car parked nearby, as if calculating whether he could somehow escape the consequences of his complicity. But Maya had been watching Chen too during her investigation. Unlike Morrison, Chen wasn't malicious, just weak. He went along to get along, turned a blind eye to maintain his partnership, chose silence over integrity. The department had too many officers like Chen, good people who became enablers through their inaction. "Officer Chen," Maya said, turning her attention to him. "How many times have you witnessed Officer Morrison engage in this kind of behavior?" Chen's eyes widened. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, knowing that any answer would condemn him. "Captain, the stress of the job sometimes." "That's not an answer," Maya said, her tone leaving no room for evasion. "How many times?" The crowd pressed closer, sensing the gravity of the moment. Among them, Maya noticed several people she recognized from the neighborhood, residents who had filed complaints about police harassment that had gone nowhere. An elderly black man with kind eyes nodded at her with what looked like vindication. A young Latina woman with a baby on her hip had tears streaming down her face. These were the people Morrison and others like him had terrorized with impunity, secure in the knowledge that their badges would protect them. Morrison suddenly lurched forward, his voice desperate. "Captain Richardson, please. I have a family. My wife is pregnant with our second child. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I can change. Give me another chance. Please." Maya felt a flicker of something, not quite sympathy but a recognition of the human cost of this moment. Morrison's children would grow up knowing their father lost everything because he spit on a black woman. His wife would face financial uncertainty and social stigma. But then Maya thought about all the families Morrison had impacted with his cruelty, all the people who had lost jobs because of false arrests, all the children who had learned to fear the police because of officers like him. "You're right about one thing," Maya said, her voice softer but no less firm. "You made a terrible mistake. But it wasn't just today, Morrison. I've been watching you for 3 weeks. I've seen you plant evidence during a traffic stop. I've witnessed you use excessive force on suspects who were already restrained. I've heard you use racial slurs when you thought no one was listening. Today wasn't an aberration. Today was just the first time you got caught in a way you can't deny or explain away." Morrison's face crumbled. He looked around wildly, as if searching for support, but found none. Even Chen had turned away, unable or unwilling to meet his partner's eyes. The crowd remained silent, bearing witness to this moment of accountability that so rarely occurred in public spaces. Maya pulled out her phone and made a call. "Lieutenant Harris, this is Captain Richardson. I need backup at the corner of Peachtree and Ellis. I'm placing Officer Derek Morrison under arrest. Send a unit immediately and notify Internal Affairs that we have a Code 4-7 situation." She paused, listening. "Yes, that's correct. An officer has committed assault while on duty. Multiple civilian witnesses and video evidence. I'll brief you fully once the scene is secured." Morrison's legs seemed to give out, and he sank to his knees on the sidewalk. Some officers might have seen this as a gesture of remorse, but Maya recognized it for what it was, the collapse of a man who had finally run out of ways to escape the consequences of his actions. She felt no pleasure in his downfall, only a grim determination to see justice through to its conclusion. Within minutes, 3 patrol cars arrived, sirens wailing. Lieutenant Marcus Harris emerged from the first vehicle, his expression grave. He was a good cop, one of Maya's most trusted officers, and she had briefed him on the investigation without revealing she would be in the field herself. His eyes took in the scene, understanding immediately the significance of what had occurred. "Morrison," Harris said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Stand up and put your hands behind your back." Morrison rose shakily, tears now streaming openly down his face. "Marcus, please. We went through the academy together. You know me." "I thought I did," Harris replied, his jaw tight. "Turns out I was wrong." As Harris read Morrison his rights, Maya turned to address the crowd that had witnessed everything. Maya stood before the assembled crowd, feeling the weight of their expectations pressing down on her shoulders like a physical force. These weren't just spectators who had stumbled upon a dramatic confrontation. They were members of a community that had been crying out for justice, for accountability, for someone in authority to finally acknowledge their pain and take action. The phone's still recording, the faces still watching, all represented a hunger for change that Maya both understood and felt responsible for addressing. "I want to thank all of you for staying and bearing witness to what happened here today," Maya began, her voice carrying across the street. "What you saw isn't just about one officer's misconduct. It's symptomatic of a larger problem within law enforcement, a culture that sometimes protects bad actors instead of holding them accountable. I want you to know that this ends here, today." An older black woman in the crowd stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "Captain, my son was arrested by that officer 6 months ago. He said Morrison planted drugs on him, but nobody believed him. My boy lost his job, his apartment, everything. Can you help him?" Maya's heart clenched. She had suspected Morrison's corruption ran deep, but hearing the human cost spelled out so directly made it real in a way that case files never could. "I want you to contact Internal Affairs directly. Ask for Lieutenant Harris," she gestured toward Marcus. "We'll review your son's case immediately. If evidence was planted, we'll work to overturn his conviction and pursue justice on his behalf." More voices rose from the crowd, each sharing their own stories of harassment, false arrests, intimidation. Maya listened to each one, committing details to memory, promising follow-up. Lieutenant Harris took notes, collecting names and contact information. What had started as a single incident of misconduct had cracked open something larger, exposing the accumulated grievances of an entire community. Chen, Morrison's partner, stood off to the side under guard, his face ashen. Maya approached him, keeping her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Officer Chen, you have a choice to make right now. You can go down with Morrison, protecting the blue wall of silence and destroying your own career in the process. Or you can cooperate fully with the investigation, provide testimony about everything you've witnessed, and perhaps salvage something from this disaster. But I need your decision now." Chen's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "I never wanted any of this," he whispered. "I just wanted to do my job, help people. But Morrison, he was senior to me. He said I needed to back him up, that partners protect each other no matter what. I didn't know how to say no." "You found out how today," Maya replied. "The question is whether you're brave enough to keep saying no to corruption, even when it's hard. Even when it costs you friendships or makes you unpopular. That's what integrity requires." Before Chen could respond, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Commissioner James Thompson emerged, his silver hair gleaming in the morning sun, his expression grave. He was a political appointee, more comfortable at fundraising dinners than crime scenes, but to his credit, he had given Maya full authority to pursue her investigation without interference. Now he would have to face the public consequences of what she had uncovered. "Captain Richardson," Thompson said formally. "I received your report. This is significant." "It's a disaster, Commissioner," Maya corrected bluntly. "And it's been building for years while we failed to act on community complaints. Morrison didn't become this person overnight. He was enabled by a system that valued closing cases over serving justice, that prioritized officer solidarity over civilian safety. We have a lot of work to do." Thompson winced but nodded. He turned to face the crowd, which had swelled to over 100 people as word spread through the neighborhood. Maya watched him carefully, wondering if he would rise to the moment or retreat into bureaucratic platitudes. "I want to apologize," Thompson began, and Maya felt a spark of hope. "To this community, to every person who has been harmed by officers who betrayed their oath. What happened here today is unacceptable, and it represents a failure of leadership at every level, including mine. Captain Richardson's investigation has revealed systemic problems that require immediate and comprehensive reform. I'm committing today to a full review of our complaint procedures, mandatory body cameras for all officers, and the establishment of an independent civilian oversight board. But more importantly, I'm committing to listening. Your voices matter. Your experiences matter. And we will do better." The crowd's response was mixed. Some nodded approvingly, while others remained skeptical, and Maya understood both reactions. Words were cheap. Real change required sustained effort, resources, political will, and a fundamental shift in police culture. But it was a start, and starts mattered. An ambulance arrived to transport Morrison, who had become increasingly unresponsive, almost catatonic. Maya felt no satisfaction watching him being loaded onto a stretcher. There was no joy in destroying a career, even one that deserved destruction. She thought about his pregnant wife, his children, and wondered what she could have done differently. Could Morrison have been saved if someone had intervened earlier in his career? Had there been warning signs that supervisors missed or ignored? These questions would haunt her. Lieutenant Harris approached, his tablet filled with witness statements and contact information. "Captain, we have at least 15 people claiming various forms of harassment or false arrest by Morrison over the past 2 years. This is going to be a massive investigation." "Good," Maya replied. "Get internal affairs to assign additional investigators. I want every case reviewed, every complaint validated or dismissed based on evidence." "And Harris? I want you to lead the community liaison team. We need to rebuild trust, and that starts with showing we take their concerns seriously." As the scene began to clear, news vans arrived, reporters shouting questions. Maya knew she would have to face them eventually, that this story would dominate the local news cycle for days or weeks. But first, she needed to check on someone. The homeless man who had triggered this entire sequence of events sat on a bench a block away. Maya found the homeless man sitting on a weathered wooden bench under the shade of an oak tree, his few belongings gathered protectively around him. He looked up as she approached, his eyes wary and tired, the look of someone who had learned not to expect kindness from people in authority. Maya sat down beside him, leaving a respectful distance between them, and for a moment, neither spoke. "I'm sorry," Maya said finally. "Sorry that you were treated that way. Sorry that it took my presence for anyone to care. You deserved better from the beginning." The man studied her face, searching for sincerity. "Name's Robert," he said quietly. "Robert Washington. Used to be an electrician before I lost my job, then my apartment, then my family. Been on the streets for 3 years now. That officer, Morrison, has kicked me around before. Today wasn't nothing new, except you showed up." Maya felt the weight of that statement. How many times had Morrison abused his authority when no captain was watching, when no cameras were rolling? How many Robert Washingtons were there in Atlanta, people whose suffering went unnoticed because they existed in society's blind spots? "Robert, I want to connect you with some resources," Maya said, pulling out her phone. "There's a veteran services organization downtown that helps with housing and job placement. Are you a veteran?" "Army, 2 tours in Iraq," Robert replied, a hint of pride creeping into his voice. "Combat electrician. Came home with PTSD, couldn't hold down work anymore. Things just spiraled." "Then you're entitled to VA benefits and support," Maya said firmly. "I'm going to make some calls right now, and we're going to get you help. Not as charity, but as what you earn through your service. And Robert? I want you to know that what happened today, you standing there taking that abuse, you're part of the reason things might actually change. Your dignity in that moment mattered." Robert's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Never thought I'd hear a cop say something like that to me." Maya spent the next hour making calls, pulling in favors, and leveraging her position to cut through bureaucratic red tape. By the time she finished, Robert had an appointment at the VA hospital, a temporary bed at a clean shelter specifically for veterans, and a caseworker assigned to help him navigate the system. It wouldn't solve everything overnight, but it was a foundation to build on. As she walked back toward her car, Maya's phone buzzed constantly with messages. The video of her confrontation with Morrison had indeed gone viral, racking up millions of views across social media platforms. The comments section was predictably divided. Some praised her courage and called for systemic reform. Others accused her of undermining police authority or suggested the whole thing was staged. A few contained the kind of racial slurs and threats that Maya had learned to expect whenever she became visible in her role. But among the noise, there were messages that mattered. A young black woman wrote that seeing Maya stand up to Morrison had inspired her to file a complaint she had been too afraid to submit. A retired officer thanked her for trying to clean up a force he felt had lost its way. A teacher shared the video with her students as an example of moral courage. These messages, Maya knew, were what mattered. Not the viral fame or the political fallout, but the small shifts in consciousness that might lead to larger change. Commissioner Thompson called as she reached her car. "Captain Richardson, I need you at headquarters immediately. The mayor wants a full briefing, and the press is demanding a statement. This situation is escalating beyond anything we anticipated." "On my way," Maya replied, though she felt bone-tired. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and the emotional toll of the day's events. But this was the job she had signed up for, the responsibility that came with the rank and the badge. The police headquarters buzzed with activity when Maya arrived. Officers she had known for years looked at her with a mixture of respect and uncertainty. Some nodded in support, while others avoided eye contact, perhaps wondering if she had been investigating them too. The blue wall of silence that protected bad cops also made good cops suspicious of anyone who threatened the status quo. In the commissioner's conference room, Maya faced a panel of city officials, union representatives, and legal advisors. For 3 hours, she presented her findings from the undercover investigation, detailing not just Morrison's actions but the systemic failures that had allowed them to continue unchecked. She showed videos of other incidents, presented complaint files that had been dismissed without proper investigation, and outlined the cultural problems within several precincts. The police union representative, a grizzled sergeant named O'Brien, pushed back hard. "Captain Richardson, with all due respect, you're painting the entire force with the same brush as one bad officer. Officer Morrison's actions were reprehensible, but they don't represent the thousands of good cops who risk their lives every day." "You're right, Sergeant O'Brien," Maya replied calmly. "Morrison doesn't represent everyone. But the system that protected him, that ignored complaints against him, that allowed his behavior to continue without consequence? That system involves a lot more than one officer. Good cops like you should be the most outraged by what happened today, because Morrison's actions endanger every officer on the street by destroying public trust." The meeting ended with commitments to reform, though Maya knew from experience that promises made in crisis mode often faded once media attention moved elsewhere. The real work would happen in the months ahead, in training sessions and policy reviews and the slow, grinding effort to change institutional culture. As Maya finally left headquarters near midnight, she found Lieutenant Harris waiting by her car. "Thought you might want some company," he said. "It's been a hell of a day." They drove to an all-night diner, the kind of place where cops had gathered for generations to decompress after difficult shifts. Over coffee and pie, they talked about the investigation, about Morrison and Chen, about the community members who had shared their stories. But they also talked about hope, about the young officers coming up through the academy who seemed more committed to community policing and de-escalation than previous generations. "Do you think today mattered?" Harris asked. "Or will it just be another viral video that everyone forgets in a week?" Maya considered the question carefully. "I think it mattered to Robert Washington, the homeless veteran who got treated with dignity, maybe for the first time in years. It mattered to that young girl in the crowd who saw a black woman in authority standing up for what's right. It mattered to Morrison's future victims, the ones who won't exist because he's off the streets. Does it solve everything? No. But we don't get to solve everything. We just get to do the right thing in the moments we're given and hope it ripples outward." When Maya finally arrived home in the early morning hours, she found a handwritten note slipped under her door. It was from her neighbor, an elderly white woman who had always been polite but distant. The note read simply, "I saw what you did today. Thank you for your courage. You make me proud to be an American." Maya placed the note on her refrigerator, next to a photo of her mother, who had cleaned houses to put Maya through college. Her mother had always told her that real change happened one person at a time, one decision at a time, one moment of courage at a time. Today had been one of those moments. As the sun rose over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Maya Richardson stood at her window and thought about the work still ahead. Morrison would face trial. Chen would have to decide what kind of officer he wanted to be. The department would implement reforms, some meaningful and some performative. The community would remain skeptical, rightfully so, until actions matched words over sustained time. But somewhere in the city, a young woman was deciding to file a complaint she had been afraid to submit. A rookie officer was questioning behavior he had been told to ignore. A homeless veteran was sleeping in a clean bed with hope for tomorrow. And a girl who had witnessed injustice confronted had learned that courage could wear a badge. These were the ripples Maya had spoken of, small but spreading outward, touching lives in ways she would never fully know. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.